Manhattan courthouse ruled that the 32-year-old knew he acted criminally but had shown no remorse. Mr. Bankman-Fried, who is expected to appeal the sentence, apologised for his actions but did not admit to criminal wrongdoing. He was found guilty of fraud and money laundering last year. Before his firm's collapse in 2022, the former billionaire became a celebrity on top of a crypto empire. Prosecutors say he raided customer accounts for bribes, illegal political donations, and risky investments. Our business correspondent Michelle Fleury has more.
The judge had to decide a couple of things in taking into account the sentencing. He was considering the age, the losses involved, the impact on the victims, but also the message of deterrent. And ultimately, he settled on 25 years for Sam Bankman-Fried, sending him to prison for that amount of time. It was less than lawyers who had been prosecuting the case had been asking for. They wanted 40 to 50 years. By contrast, lawyers for Mr. Bankman-Fried were saying he should get less than 7 years. And Judge Lewis Kaplan decided that splitting the difference somewhere in the middle was the way to go. The judge clearly thought that although Mr. Bankman-Fried has autism, that he, as he said in court, sometimes can be a bit socially awkward, Judge Kaplan clearly felt that this was a serious crime, and he wanted to send that message of deterrent. He was also not convinced that Mr. Bankman-Fried had shown enough remorse, and he wasn't convinced that he might not try to essentially cheat people potentially again. And so that's why he settled on this lengthy sentence, one that white-collar lawyers, professors have been telling me seemed to be the sort of right amount, that it felt right to them, and one that would be hard to challenge.
A short time ago, I spoke to Stephen Ehrlich. He's the Director of Research at Forbes Crypto, and he also interviewed Sam Bankman-Fried last year in jail. A prison sentence was all but guaranteed. The question was, for how long? Were you surprised with the 25 years?
No, I wasn't terribly surprised with it. I mean, the statutory guidelines suggested a prison sentence of a century or more, which seemed ludicrous at the time. The prosecutors were looking for 40 to 50 years, which it's not quite a life sentence, but it's pretty close in his case. I mean, 25 years seems to be what the prevailing expectation was before all this happened. Again, taking into account, not to forgive the enormity of his crimes, but he is still relatively young. He has no prior convictions or history of bad behavior. And I mean, at this point, he's going to have to serve 85% of his sentence. He's going to get out in his 50s, and maybe then he will be able to be a productive member of society. But 25 to 30 years seem to be what most of the community expected.
Now, you've interviewed Mr. Bankman-Fried, as we said. Judge Kaplan said today that there's a risk that this man will be in a position to do something very bad in the future, and it's not a trivial risk. Do you agree with that?
It's hard to say. I mean, I've interviewed him multiple times. I actually interviewed him hours before he was arrested in the Bahamas. I was his last interview as a free man, and in all of his conversations and all of his writings since then, even today that Judge Kaplan referenced it, he didn't really show much remorse. He felt that the assets were always there, that creditors are going to be made whole, even if it's at November 2022 prices. And he kind of has this calculus where he's willing to take big risks if the rewards are worth it, even by a sliver. So it's hard to know what's in a person's heart. I mean, obviously, Sam Bankman-Fried fooled a lot of people in the media, in the investment community, in just broader finance. So it's hard to know what's for sure. But I can certainly understand a degree of fear that Judge Kaplan may have that when Sam Bankman-Fried gets out, he could do this again.
Now, he was also ordered to forfeit $11 billion, and the judge said that could be used to pay back some of his victims. Are those people going to see their money again?
I believe that they will, but again, it's hard to know for sure. The $11 billion, I think, is made to cover the total extent of all the losses that FTX incurred. That covers retail investors, that covers lenders, that covers investors. Because remember, he was convicted of fraud, conspiracy against many different groups. But again, in his submissions before the court, before sentencing, he talked about how creditors are going to be made whole. They're going to be paid back 100%. But it's very important to remember that 100% in U.S. dollar figures for the price of crypto in November 2022, which really was the nadir of this entire bear market. Bitcoin now is up something 60 to 70% since then. Other assets are up even higher, and customers that are not only have had to wait at least 2 years for those gains, for the funds to be returned, and they haven't gotten them yet, are not going to see those gains. So it's definitely maybe a bit of a silver lining, but it's a bitter pill to swallow for a lot of these customers.
The Biden administration has approved Maryland's request of $60 million aid for recovery efforts after a bridge in Baltimore collapsed when it was hit by a cargo ship. We can look now at live pictures of the wreckage of the Francis Scott Key Bridge, where divers on Wednesday found the bodies of 2 people in a red pickup truck underwater. 8 workers were on the bridge when it was hit by the cargo ship Dolly, plunging them into the waters below. 2 were rescued on the day, but the search continues for 4 other men who were working on the bridge repairing potholes, and all are now presumed dead. Investigators say the container ship that crashed and still remains in the Patapsco River was carrying more than 700 tons of hazardous materials. The jobs of at least 8,000 workers at the Port of Baltimore are affected by the collapse of the bridge. Maryland State Governor Wes Moore outlined what's next.
First, we need to continue to focus on recovery, because it is our obligation to bring a sense of closure to these families. The second, we need to clear the channel and open vessel traffic to the port, because the health of the Maryland economy and the national economy depends on it. Third, we need to take care of all the people who have been affected by this crisis. And that means the families, that means the workers, that means the businesses, that means the first responders, that means everybody. And in the military, I know I was taught something. And one of the things we were taught is you always take care of your people. And we're going to make sure that in this moment, we take care of our people. And fourth, we need to rebuild the Francis Scott Key Bridge.
Based on interviews with 60 former prisoners of war, the UN says it has found credible evidence that Russian soldiers have been torturing Ukrainian prisoners to extract military information. The most common methods of torture, it says, included beatings, electric shocks, threats of execution, mock executions, and positional torture.